Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Jonathan Demme.
Oh.
And for Daniel Wolf.
Thank you.
Whose movie I'm Carolyn Parker you've just seen. And we will take some questions from you in a moment. Firstly, have there been a lot of these kind of things for I'm Carolyn Parker?
A year ago, we went on the festival circuit. We were invited to a lot of film festivals, including the Venice International Film Festival and the Toronto Festival and the New Orleans Festival. So we had that moment, but it was always planned for, because this was partially financed by POV, and they encouraged us to show the film, and this is longer than what is being shown on POV. So we finally found distribution, and we've been starting to have some screenings. So this is both, this isn't the millionth place we've been to, but it's part of an expansion now, because we got a really fabulous review in the New York Times when the movie came out, and there's been a lot of good press on it, and that's encouraged other screenings of it. You know, with documentaries, this is what it's all about, having the opportunity to show the film to people who are interested in the subject matter, and having discussions not about topping the charts.
So I know the story's told, in the movie itself, in a sense. But tell me, how did you come to make this movie? Why did the movie even occur in the first place in your life? What were you thinking of originally?
It actually started because, like everybody else here, I'm sure, Daniel and I, each in our own unique ways, because we were two very separate human beings, we were traumatized by what we saw on television of what was going on in New Orleans after the floods. And there's a longing to see things get better, somehow participate, but how? There's no indication of that. And then, as it says in the film, I spoke with my friend Cyril Neville, who was in the Neville Brothers, and he had kind of vanished, as so many New Orleanians did afterwards. Where are they? And he told me said that, what's going on in New Orleans today is that there are a group of people who are returning to their homes and trying to save them. So then Daniel and I thought, well, maybe we can go down and document some of these people and bear witness to this effort to rebuild their homes in the face of the bureaucracies really wanting to bulldoze the homes. So we went down. We didn't know what we were doing. I was a cameraman. I didn't know how to use a camera. Our first days. Are there any cinema students here? Yeah. Oh, lots of cinema students. Yeah. I had a couple of. Well, I know how to turn them on and off, but here's how I can illustrate. One of our cameras, we got back to New York to look at our footage, and all on one camera, everything we shot was solarized. It was like, wow, that's a trippy effect, but I don't think we can use it. We have the solarization button? Yeah, it was one click off where it was meant to be. So after 4 visits, we had, nothing much had changed at all in New Orleans because all the bureaucracies were so hopeless. But we had become, very close to the people we had met, and we felt a commitment now to continue to film with them until they were back in their house. Little did we realize this would take 5 years in the case of Carolyn, and Haris as well. Well, Haris was 4 years, I guess. So that's what we did, and we met Tavis Smiley. Is everybody familiar with the Tavis Smiley show and stuff like that? So I met Tavis Smiley and told him what we were doing, and he said, well, listen, cut 5 20-minute little films together from that footage you're getting, and I'll show them on my TV show for a full week. So we did that.
Which is also, that's what we saw now. So may I now introduce, for those of you who weren't at the amazing presentation, like Daniel Wolf, and he showed one of those 20 minutes, a bit of footage. Explain who you are and what you are to do with the movie.
I think I'm Daniel Wolf, and I'm the producer of the movie, which, as I explained to you earlier, means I drove the car while Jonathan was shooting out the window.
With a solarized setting on the camera.
Right, exactly. And
We were hot, Donald.
We were.
I'm telling you.
We
We
were.
didn't know. We were like, where's the footage? First of all, we couldn't find anyone to talk to.
Right. We
No one
rented
was
a car.
into us. 4
Right.
months later, nobody's there.
Yeah. No, we didn't know what we were doing. I mean, I think we know a little more now,
Yes, a lot more.
but we certainly didn't
So
know
when you
then.
go to make this movie again, it'll be better.
Well, when we make the second one about Donald's mother,
Right.
we'll know a little bit more about it. And it really was what Jonathan said, was that there became a commitment to the people, and I think to each other, that we were just going to stick with this. It was an amazing city, it's amazing people, and it's, I think, a incredibly important American story. It's a test case for America to see what they care about and what their beliefs are. And Carolyn Parker, as you guys just saw, said, I don't care what you say, I'm going to live in this house. And that to us was inspirational.
Yeah, definitely.
And why don't
it's
you?
like-
Why don't you guys introduce Donald, who also played at the presentation this afternoon? But I think your introduction will be better than mine.
Well, if you're not hip to Donald's music yet, download him immediately so you can have your life transformed. He's just as brilliant an American musician as it gets, composer, musician, and we've actually, he's a subject of the next film we're going to do, the Harrison film, and also Donald came up and played a part in the movie Rachel Getting Married, as Daniel played a part in that. And Donald wound up being the composer for the film, along with Zafar Tawil. And so and then we've kind of kept in touch. And well, you should say what we're going to do, but as a segue into that, when we were describing how we didn't know what we were doing when we got there, but little by little we came to get it together, it reminded me of what you were talking about with the scales, how you got to know the scales.
Oh yeah, to know the inner workings of something makes, when you master something, but it takes a lot of hard work to what I call be natural with something. Like music is like a tree or like water or like the wind in the air, which is what I do. But to become a person who is one with the understanding of music takes a lot of work and a lot of understanding of the basic fundamentals of what it is. So I teach. I think that's what he's alluding to. But I also want to say these guys could never not know what they're doing. I've been around them. And what you read about how brilliant and the hard condition of these gentlemen, what you read about it's only a minute sample of what it really is. And it's been a joy to see them, what they have given to New Orleans and will give to New Orleans and to the country and the world. Mr. Wolf said that it was a test. And that's something I agree with. One of the first things I said, that the hurricane would be a test for the soul of America. Because I think a country has a soul, and it brought, my wife said this hurricane is bringing people's heart condition to the surface, because there were no rules. So you saw people who were doing horrendous things, people in the government and private citizens, and people who were charged with protecting citizens, like policemen and firefighters. Some of them were doing horrendous things. But in the middle of that, you also saw these great angels and people with hearts of gold and silver who were doing great things to help people, who were sacrificing their own being, their own lives, to ensure that New Orleans would survive and the people would survive. So I always talk about heart condition, and that shows that we have both things here. And hopefully the people who do the things that don't help society and don't help the bigger picture will be enlightened and change, and we can have a greater society. And I had a great father who told me when I was young, and who told me a lot over the course of my time while he was here, that in life you only need a few things. You need something to eat, a place to stay where you're secure, and some love in your life. Everything you get after that is extra. So I never had stress because he showed me how to have peace in my heart. And when you have peace in your heart, you have everything. So I see gentlemen around me who live their lives like that. And it's very heartening, and it's great to be around. And I just want to say, Mike, what's his name? Michael Jordan, the basketball player, had a phrase, if I could be like Mike, I'm going to change that. If I could be like Jonathan or Daniel, that's the ticket, baby. It's good to be here, and thank y'all.
Back 150%, right?
That's for
I mean, you
sure.
know, one of the things about this movie that people say is Carolyn Parker so extraordinary, and I think she is, but there's also Donald Harrison and Harisse Harrison and a bunch of other people we met down there who are doing amazing stuff, and to the degree it's a test, I think it's still a test. If you guys are wondering, it ain't over. And there's stuff to do in New Orleans, and I'm sure stuff to do in New Jersey too, but the test hasn't ended, I don't think.
Jonathan, you know, you make out, I'm giving you a football to kick into the audience. You make out that this was you didn't know what you were doing when you went down to make this movie, and it's a very credible, obviously, I can understand how that's true. But how much is that true, when you're making a movie like Silence of the Lambs, or when you're making a movie like Rachel Gets Married? I mean, are they all on this big scale of basically not knowing what to do, and some more than others? And what's the large scale of when you're trying to make a movie of how little you really know what you're doing, and how much you're discovering as you do it?
Right. Well, don't forget, in making a film, it's not an individual effort. In this case, it was a tiny effort. Because we didn't know what we were doing and what have you. But there's a group of people come together to make a film, each of them expert in one area or another. So there's already a lot of help on hand. But the key, obvious distinction between us not knowing how to attack our what we call that the right to return project. We had a cast. And we had a situation, but we didn't have a script. Life unfolding was going to provide the script.
Yeah.
When we do Silence of the Lambs, we have an absolute finite blueprint. It's a script. It's broken down into scene numbers and locations and day or night. We can schedule it. Of course, it can all go to hell in a handbasket, when other realities intrude. But we know how much that's going to cost. We know how long it's going to take, more or less, and we go forth that way. Rachel Getting Married was a different situation because we had, budgetarily, but although Silence of the Lambs was pretty low budget.
No, I mean, but it's somewhere in the middle of those two experiences.
It is, because we had a script, but we didn't want to plan it. So we pretended we were making a documentary, and all the actors, rose to that occasion. Everybody knew their lines, and we'd get out there and, okay, I would be sitting in my nice comfortable chair looking at the monitor and I'd say action, and then they'd start acting and the cameraman would find a shot and I'd look at the monitor and go, this is fabulous. So that's the thing, but that's what the great excitement for me about documentaries is. You just, all you know is you care about the people you're filming. All you know is this situation is intense and has a lot to it. Now let's see what happens.
The story I remember from this is we went to look for some funding, which of course we never got before this movie happened. And one person we talked to said, that sounds great, you're going to New Orleans to see how people are doing. We're really interested, just tell us what the happy ending is.
Yeah.
We went, what? We don't even know the people yet. We don't, and it was that sense of kind of, you should know the script ahead of time. When we say we didn't know what we were doing, it's more than technical. We couldn't know what the ending was.
Yeah, that was the Oprah Winfrey show, and they bought us our plane tickets and everything, and then like you said, and they want to know who the characters were going to be, and we said, well, we haven't met any of them yet, really. And the happy ending thing, and then we got a call back the next day, about 2 days before we were going to leave, and they went, you know, there's a community on the Mississippi Gulf Coast that has had extraordinary comeback already. In only 4 months, everybody's back in their houses and stuff. Why don't you do that instead of New Orleans? And that's when we said, you know, keep the plane tickets. You know, we're just going to go fumble our way into this situation.
Do you think? I mean, when I was watching the movie. Something I was very struck by was the contractor from California, whose name was
Eddie.
Did you? I mean, he turns out to be a kind of a baddie in the sense of the movie, right?
Sure.
Yes, kind of.
Well, he turns out to be someone who, you know, I don't believe in baddies particularly, but he is, as we see, he's someone who didn't do what he promised to do.
Yeah.
When you heard him, sorry.
Go ahead.
When you heard him speaking those first lines about how great it is and how great she was, when I was watching the movie, not having any idea what was going to happen, I thought, not because of narrative or what I know about the way you might have structured this movie, however you could have structured it, from the way he was talking, I felt he was an insincere man. When he was saying those things initially, what a great woman, and, you know, God, that warms my heart to do all this stuff. I didn't trust him from the word go. Did you trust him? It's just a very small thing. Did you trust him?
Me and Daniel will have a different take. Like the Parkers, I was so desperate to see work proceed on the house that I chose to believe that he was for real. The wrinkle for me was that when he rejected Pastor Mel's offer of a whole team of people coming in to push the thing forward, when he rejected that, I was like, ooh, that bothered me. But no, in that moment, I was thrilled. I had a gigantic smile on my face. I didn't go like, oh, this is great. He's going to be an asshole. You know, I was like, wow, at last.
As a watcher, I was very nervous because I didn't believe the things he was saying.
That's very perceptive of you.
Let's throw that out. You've just seen the movie. Did anybody else get that feeling, or am I the most perceptive man in the world?
That he was untrustworthy?
Yeah. Did anybody else put your hands up if you got that feeling?
Yeah.
Why is that? He just looked shifty to me when he was saying. What do you think, Daniel?
Well, I agree with John. Our take was the same, and Donald can probably talk about this more. You couldn't be too picky about your contractors at that point. I mean, among other things,
after a couple of years of trying to find someone great, you couldn't be too picky.
You couldn't be too picky, and you know, the Parkers were not alone in having to pay all the money up front to this guy. I mean, that was standard for contractors unless you held out. Did you run into this, Donald? Did you have the...
That is one of the great untold stories of Katrina, is contractor fraud. And I've learned a lot from contractors because they, first of all, the very nature of the job is that they're trying to make as much money as they can, and they are very adept at pulling the wool over your eyes because it's part of their job to tell you it's going to be one price, get you involved with them, get some money from you, and now you're stuck with them because they've taken so much money from you. You have to try to ride it out, and then they ask for more money, and if you don't give it to them, they won't come back. It's just a horrendous game that they play, and they are masters of doing it. In the meantime, I was green. I didn't know anything about how to fix a house, but now I'm adept at plumbing, framing, carpentry, woodwork, what kind of materials, what antique cypress is, different types of whether it's old tree. If the tree is 500, I can look at the grain. 500 years old, I can look at the grain now and say, this is old growth, this is new growth. I can understand what a latheret does from the old days when they put up plaster. how to do doors. And now I have a hobby of building furniture. So, because contractors ripped me off so much, I had to figure out what was going on and exactly how to do all of these jobs. So either I was doing it or I was there with them, watching them. So when they were telling me that they were doing something, I could say, no, you're not doing it, because I know how to do it too. Or I could take over and say, watch out, I'm gonna do it, and if you don't do it right, then you're out of here. They couldn't play any more games with me. And so that's what happened with me, but unfortunately a lot of people, including some people who were older, were duped out of all of their money and never got their houses fixed. So that's the sad reality. But we hope that they can get some kind of restitution one day.
Yeah.
Just before we, if anybody's got any questions, they should stick their hands up. While you think about that for a second, just a very general question. You know, Werner Herzog has that kind of thing where he's like, my films, my fiction films, my documentaries, it's all the same thing. I've just seen a trilogy of movies you made about Neil Young. I've just heard you talking with Neil about those movies. I know your fiction movie. In your head, is it just all part of one long song like Neil Young, or do you really differentiate between them and see it as two different wings of your work, as it were?
Do you mean within the different Neil Young movies, or?
No, generally your documentary. You know,
Yeah.
those kind of movies. Because Herzog will say it's exactly the same to me. You know, this movie I've made about the volcano and the man who survived it, and you know, it's a Nosferatu. It's all the same thing, really.
Yeah.
You're an idiot if you don't think it's the same thing.
Well, I don't know about grading the perception of, but no, it's. I know for me, just speaking very personally, it just gets me so hot to shoot. Shooting a documentary really turns me on. Shooting a great musical performance turns me on. Working with great actors, filming that turns me on.
Right.
I find this all tremendously exciting. And I think, you know, there's probably themes, you know, like I'm like an old hippie, so it's got to be positive, you know, it's got to be as truthful as possible,
Right.
whichever medium it is. And it's got to, you know, we're doing this in the hopes that when people look at it, they'll have a really strong, positive experience. They'll be glad they saw it. So it is, well, I guess I agree with him without going to pejoratives for those that don't.
That's his language. It doesn't have to be your language. Okay. Anybody got any questions for anybody on this
Or
stage?
comments.
Or comments on the movie that you've just seen and hopefully enjoyed.
During the movie, this is a bit more a question about just general acting in fictional movies. First of all, I'd like to say, big fan of Silence of the Lambs. Philip is one of the few movies that actually made me a little weepy.
Thank you.
I have a question though. I've run into this problem because I've made lots of movies with my friends and things like that over the years with my friends. And the one thing I can never get is how to stop actors from laughing in inappropriate situations. And one moment that really strikes me as very interesting is in Silence of the Lambs when Buffalo Bill's doing this little dance with his jump fight between his legs. I just like, I can't wrap my mind around how you, first of all, film that, and I know in the movie it's like at the tone of, it's like he's like a psycho, it's supposed to be creepy, but if you watch that scene, it's hilarious. And so it's kind of a double-layer question. First of all, it's like how do you film that and try to keep that tone while you're filming? And second of all, how do you put that into the movie and make sure that that creepy tone is kept in the context of the movie?
Well, you know, sometimes we laugh instead of crying. Sometimes we laugh when we're scared shitless, and we, you know. So that's a reasonable response to seeing a person who's holding a young woman captive in a pit, and the next thing you know, he's standing naked with his, I believe you said his junk tucked in? Yes. Concealing his genitals, yes. And he's in front of a mirror doing that. And in case you didn't think this guy was problematic to begin with, now you know it even more. But you know, in terms of if you turn the sound down and watch the movie, that's as important a sequence as anything in the film, because this James Gumb, also known as Buffalo Bill, he wants to become a woman. Why? Because he's filled with self-loathing. And a woman is as far away from his true self as he can get. Why is he filled with self-loathing? Probably because he was profoundly abused and or neglected as a child. So this is a tremendously important insight into the character of this captor. This is actually an effort to differentiate him from a crazy killer. This is a big clue. Look how happy he is. It's the only time you ever see him happy. He's looking at himself as a woman, and he's happy now. He's made that transformation, even as this suit of human skin is another way for him to make the transformation. So yeah, that's the answer to that one.
How do you film something like that and not like? Is the crew laughing off camera?
No.
They're all doing
no.
doing very specific jobs. They have to concentrate extremely hard on,
Yeah,
right?
and plus
No, they've got their mind on their work.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that most everybody there found this very disturbing, because everybody was, on the film, we were all very moved by Clarice's extraordinary effort to save the life of this young woman. So we had a lot of fun shooting that movie, but we took what we were filming very seriously. So to us, it wasn't remotely funny. It was even sad that this is what this guy has come to. He's kidnapping young women, putting them in pits, and dressing up through this. This guy's got problems. So that's not funny. It's horrible.
Were there any moments during the movie we've just seen that where you were, moved? Like you're like, okay, so I'm traveling to do my job now, and I need to keep my mind on it because I don't want the film to be solarized or anything idiotic like that. So how am I going to not be too moved by this thing that I'm going to do right now?
Yeah, I know one thing we often talked about on the way home was how much we loved Carolyn and Kyra and Rasan, and how terrified we were that they just weren't going to get back in the house, that nothing was happening, that the house was in Carolyn's staunch determination to find reputable people and what have you in a game where where the competition is so fierce, and the house is deteriorating. We were tremendously really worried. Are we documenting a tragedy here? Because we want to be documenting a success story.
Yes.
So there were two times for me. One, when Carolyn is in the house and she's talking about how a home is you and the way you welcome people in, and it doesn't have to be a big fancy home, but a home is so tremendously important, and she details all the things that were taken from her. And to see her putting this out without any self-pity,
right,
without any degree of that,
yeah.
I found that tremendously moving.
Yeah.
And then later in the film, when we show up and she's still waiting for the plumber, and she tells us she wished that she could be showing us the finished house, I felt that you could see that she's really clinging to her last shreds of positivism.
Right.
But she is clinging to them.
Yes.
And she is positive. And then she says, but I'm happy, because even though we're not moved in, there's walls here, and there's all this other stuff. And I went, wow, you inspire me,
The turkey dinner was a very good scene as well, with the turkey.
It was delicious, by the way.
Finally gets it. Well, as you said in the movie, Daniel,
Yeah.
I heard you off camera
Yeah, no,
exclaiming.
yes. I just wanted to repeat that in case anyone missed it.
We all caught it. No, it's a great scene too. Anybody else? Fire away.
Oh, there's a mic.
Oh,
over there.
microphone. It's okay.
All the documentaries about the little turtles that are trying to make it into the ocean, and I've watched so many of those, and I sometimes wonder why they don't just get down there and help the turtles. And so my question is related to this. I'm wondering, because you've done so many of these documentaries, there has to be a line that must have been very difficult. In other words, weren't you just tempted sometimes to just try to find a way to just step in and save the situation with some of the, some of the resources that you have? And, what was that like? And, how did you sort of manage that whole situation and in that relationship? Because it seems like it's so important.
It's a very good question about documentary making and the independent, the impartial witness.
Well, I think the bottom line was that we understood it's not, the golden rule of documentaries, you don't step in, so much as it was that it was a given that Carolyn wanted us to film because she really wanted those who might see a film, if one was actually made, that she would want people to really understand what people are up against, what we're up against. And that I feel like if we were to suddenly get Donald to do a benefit, get $50,000, bring some people down from New Jersey, which have to get it done, we would betray her whole mission, I think, in a very fundamental way. And, it's, by the way, once Carolyn was back in the house and living there again and stuff, it pleased us and made us so happy to be able to, we helped find some furniture, and we showed up with some furniture and what have you, and we actually, now that the film was finished, we built an honorarium, we called it a location fee, into the film. So we shared a little bit of money with Carolyn. We paid for this. We're never going to get our money back or anything like that. But we did, at the end of the day, we did. But you can't, it would have been an offense to suddenly step in and go, because what about all the other people who aren't being filmed by people from New York who can scrape together somehow, one way or another, enough money to help them out?
So that, in a way, that's part of the miracle of selection or of bonding that you had with this particular person, that was allowed to happen.
Yes, and Carolyn Parker, the story our movie shows is that this woman, through her determination, fueled by many things, her whole history of activism and her spirituality, that this woman, with the help of other Americans, not us, we filmed, but other Americans from all over the country came down, and where governments had failed to really be helpful, these other Americans, just out of the goodness of their hearts, helped get that house looking so beautiful as we see it at the end. And that's a great story. The story's no good anymore if the filmmakers at a certain point decided, in addition to filming, we're going to raise funds to get the house built faster.
There's a real kind of Capra-esque element, I suddenly realized, to the documentary without your involvement in it, which doesn't need you involved in it at all. It's a real Frank Capra story, where the person decides to do this thing, and at the end there's a spanking new house at the, you know what I mean? Whereas if you had got in the way of that story, it wouldn't be a Frank Capra story anymore. It'd be another kind of story altogether. You know what I mean? That's kind of
like
that
an
is
American Idol story.
Yeah, exactly. But exactly, it would be an American Idol, and perhaps there would have been people who won on American Idol involved in the benefit.
Yeah, I think it's a tough question, but I think Jonathan's right that what we do best is tell stories, and Carolyn understood that perfectly. That how we were going to really help her was by telling the story. And I mean, you guys are some evidence of that, but it's, it's played on television and stuff, and people call her now, and with this last hurricane, when people got flooded, they called up and said, we saw your movie, and you're part of what's keeping us going. And for her, that was everything she wanted.
She gets fan mail now after the TV showing. Confined people write to her and say that that she's reignited an interest in spirituality and their, what have you. It's amazing.
And another edgy moment in the movie was when you're going and you're stopped by the guy who's on a film crew. What was that? I can't remember exactly what it was now. The guy who stops the car.
The architect?
The architect, right, exactly, right. The architect. That was another edgy moment where I was like, ooh, this is either going to be ugly or it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I couldn't read what his person was going to be.
Well, part of what I was interested in that scene, and it's why Jonathan's great, I think, is there were edits that we saw where that was just hilarious. That was like a comedy routine. It was like Abbott and Costello, where he'd say, I am here to help people get in their home. And Carolyn would go, you know what I mean, like me? I got a home, you know, and they were back and forth like that. In the end, it fits into the movie much more smoothly as a dialogue about volunteers coming in and helping and trying to make it all work. But it really was slapstick, some of it.
Over there. I love David. David rambling around the room.
Oh wow, okay, sorry. A little too close. When it comes to the documentary, I mean, most people, if they've never tried doing any volunteerism or, you know, it's their first time being activists towards, you know, moments like these, after having this experience with Carolyn and her family and after this journey that you've taken with her, how has this experience actually like, influenced you? Like, especially, like, you know, not on just a personal level, but like even for your career, like for filmmaking and everything.
So you mean in the personal life?
Yeah.
How does the experience of making the film wind up affecting? Yeah. Well, it's this wonder of, you know, like, for me, I never would have imagined that this kind of expedition we decided to take every 3 months would lead to the formation of friendships, relationships that I value as much as any relationship I've ever had in my whole life. You saw Carolyn, what happened with Carolyn, and that's just, you know, that doesn't go away. It's not, you know, it's just the friendship lasts and is really in place, and I think always will be. This was multiplied for us in the films we've yet to edit. Again, Donald's mom, Hariste Harrison, which if you were there earlier today, you saw Hariste. And we filmed the next 5 years of Hariste's life. And also more and more Donald comes into play. And his sister, Charisse, is very deeply into play. And these are, again, you know, like, yeah. I mean, it's amazing that we met under those circumstances. I was filming your mother. We were filming your mother, and you showed up one day. And now, you know, like I treasure our friendship, you know, it's just like, it's a gigantic, it's just like a huge part of life. So making documentaries can do that. That's why I choose my subjects very carefully. Yeah.
Well, if I can add one thing, just it's much smaller than that, but important to me, which is there was a lesson of patience from this movie that I know you could see it with Carolyn Parker and determination, but it was also actually from Jonathan, that in the shooting of this movie, Jonathan would stay with a subject. There am I with my notebook or whatever, and he would stay and stay. And I mean, the front porch of Carolyn's one day must have been 5 hours or 6 hours of just letting her talk and shooting. And I had never seen that kind of commitment and patience for something. And it taught me a big lesson about just kind of shut up and watch now and stick with this. And there's gold there. It was amazing to discover.
Let me say that while he's thinking that, I'm thinking, this is amazing. She's so incredible. Do you believe this footage?
That's true.
Well, there's a couple more questions. Let's go with them. Go ahead. No.
No, this is good for you, David.
I'm purposely going left to right.
Okay, I got a question for Jonathan Demme about a general question. I actually thought it was interesting that you mentioned Werner Herzog, about how he changes from like a narrative story to like a documentary.
Yeah.
Like how he can make Grizzly Man, and then next he can make Rescue Dawn with Christian Bale. My question for you though is,
2 good films.
Yeah, which I like both
Yeah.
very much. Like for you, one thing I think is interesting is that you don't really have like a straight on point of like you can make all your career is all narrative or all your career is like documentary. Like you can make The Agronomist or Jimmy Carter documentary, but yeah, you can make The Maturing Candidate and Philadelphia and Silence of the Lambs. My question is that for making a documentary, where do you feel is a beginning, middle, and end. Because from a narrative, it's pretty easy. Because like Silence of the Lambs, you have a book. You can pretty much get the idea of how to make a beginning, a middle, and end. This one you couldn't because like you had to figure it out. Like you didn't know what was going on. So like my question is like, how do you figure out how the story?
Are you waiting? Are you waiting for the end? I mean, at what point did you get in your head? Her house will be finished, and then we can finish the movie.
Well,
did that become a goal?
Yeah, I'll tell you. There's 3 reference points. One is a documentary that I did in the early 90s. It's called Cousin Bobby, and it's a portrait of a cousin of mine who's this amazing radical Episcopalian minister. And we were budgeted for 12 shoot days. So that became a situation of like, that sounds like that will be an interesting day, and shooting and seeing the days run out that we still had money for. And then finally towards the end, we had, like one of the things that's great about, if I may say so, about this film is that Carolyn chose to reveal more and more and more about herself with every visit, and in a very interesting way, almost as though she had planned. Okay, they're coming back. Well, this time I'll tell them about that. And what emerges is the portrait of this extraordinary life lived of an American woman born into segregation as a child, with all that implies, coming of age as a teenager in the civil rights era, and going to the barricades and protesting and being part of the movement to begin to turn that kind of social injustice around. She has a career in the food service, in the hotel business, and kind of fulfills a whole new amazing chapter, an emancipation chapter. She becomes a chef, an accredited chef, makes enough money to retire. And then in her early 60s or late 50s, the floods come, and she finds her home ruined, and no one, the city, the state, federal, to really turn to for help in getting back in her. I like to think that if you've worked as hard, you've earned that. So that kept getting deeper and richer as we went by. And then finally, she was back in the damn house, and we took a drive that day, and we sat in the car, and she said those things. She remembered how she had felt seeing her mother's house, and I knew we had an ending. I was like, there's no place to go from here. She's back in the house. We have this amazing reflection on her part. With Donald's mom, Hariste, we shot 4.5 years, and on one visit, we went back because that's another triumph. Hariste got back in her house with the help of family and friends, and we filmed her in the very same place that we had filmed her 4 years earlier when the house was a shell. And she said, the thing was like, so Hariste, could you please talk about what it's like now to be in the house now that it's all back together? And she told what it was like, and she was great, because she was like, now it's, essentially was saying, yep, the house is perfect, we're back, and now I'm going to move. I've done that. And by the way, no more filming. This is it. So that ended because Hariste decreed the story ended, and we had the footage that supported. P.S. Then she got a big award up in Washington as being part of a community consultation group, and we went to Washington, D.C. and filmed her getting her award and everything. So it gave us a new ending, but that may be the opening scene. So that may not even be the ending. But it happens, like for anyone who's like interested in making documentaries and who might be concerned, well, what if we just shoot? And the story, life tells the story. The subjects tell the story. It's just, and it's an exciting thing to have happen, and it's always going to exceed whatever your hopes were. The real people you're filming and the way they respond to what's going on will be better than what your highest dreams of it were.
A good message for fiction writers everywhere. So let's have one more. I think maybe one more question. Are you happy to answer questions?
How many hands are there?
How many hands do we have up? We have 3. Let's do 3. There's 4. Let's do 2. Let's do
4.
3.
Let's do 4.
I'll take 6.
Here we go. I have a few for you after.
Okay, so, all right. My question is for Mr. Jonathan Demme. I know that for the hurricane, situation, it was very touching, and it's a very emotional topic for people, especially people down in New Orleans. How did you know that you were going to definitely be filming Miss Carolyn Parker the entire time? When you were first filming, that first day, what made you decide as a production that was the person you were going to mainly highlight? What made you make that decision?
Yeah, well, first of all, when Carolyn said, believe me, we didn't think we were going to be going down there for 5 years. And when Carolyn said, I want to be home, and this is in June, she says, I want to be back in my house by Christmas. And we were like, perfect. That's how long we want to come here. Right. That's perfect. That kind of...
And it's also a bit like the Oprah Winfrey people in the sense that you wanted it over quick and a happy ending.
Exactly. But when we had our first chance encounter that you see in the movie, and then on the second visit, we sat down with Carolyn and really explained. She was surprised. She was like, oh, you guys are back. And we said, yeah, here's what we're doing. And we laid it out. We want to make seasonal visits to show the changes in the neighborhood. And without missing a beat, she said, well, since you were last here, some electricity was, outlets were put, and she started just detailing the stuff. She never, ever, nor did Hariste Harrison, nor Pastor Mel, because as great as the Carolyn story is, as great a person as Carolyn is, all the other ones are equally great. We're passionate about wanting to get our quartet of portrait films edited someday. Yeah. Did I answer that? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. That's all great questions.
Oh, we got one here.
Right up
here. Hi. For Mr. Harrison and for Mr. Wolf, I'd just like to say that I really enjoyed the performances earlier, and I wanted to say to Mr. Harrison personally that I would like to thank you very much. I feel that the amount of just openness, and I would label it as vulnerability, to just put your life out there and hear your mother and learn things about yourself and your family. I think that's very strong, and I'm somewhere there with my own work, and I want to say thank you. I kind of opened my eyes to something. For Mr. Demme, if I may share, I feel that for myself, for directors, any director, any writer, any actor, part of every one of those people is almost an analyst. There's a therapist inside that person. There is an enabler. There is a person who sets things up, and I love that about your films. I've enjoyed Silence of the Lambs, like most of us, Philadelphia, and I can see that in a lot of your work, that you really set up your actors to believe their situations. There's true meaning in these lives that they're filming, but you turn that, and you look at a documentary, it's almost like you're doing that, but you're completely separating yourself from that work. How does that function for you, whereas with a film, a piece of fiction, you can direct, and here you're kind of just labeling it as a film by yourself, where you're not really as participant in emotions and where you want things to flow? I feel like you can suggest that, but maybe later on in the narrative, in the edit. But when you're filming...
Well, what you just said is true, because where both of these disciplines suddenly become exactly the same thing is in the cutting room. And that's when the director's point of view as to what story he wants to tell and the editor's sense of what the story is telling, it comes into play in exactly the same way. The shaping of the story, because you make a movie, you're telling a story. So where the footage comes from and the methodology is almost incidental, because that's just a phase in getting towards the finished film. And it's the same rules apply. You want your characters to be someone that the viewer really wants to be with and someone who they care about. And with actors, you try to work with great actors who are total immersion style actors who become their characters, who aren't trying to make the audience like them. They're trying to behave truthfully in the context of the script that they've read. With documentary people, the reason people talk so much, we have hundreds of hours of Donald's mom. We have, dozens and dozens of hours of Donald. We had hundreds of hours of Carolyn Parker. They're the authors. The people in documentaries, it's a collaboration. It's in a way even more intense than the collaboration of directors and actors who are on camera. What story do you want to tell? Carolyn now put out the experiences. Here's what's on my mind. Harised, here's what's on my mind. Here's how I respond to that. And then you see in the cutting room, you want to find the best of the people, and you shape your story that way. And you have an eye on the audience. You want the audience to care about it. So it's really it's kind of the same thing. As a director, for me, over the years, I thought when I started out as a director, I started directing when I was sort of in my mid-20s, and I had a fluky opportunity to kind of fall into that. And I thought the director had to do everything. I thought the director had to tell everybody exactly what to do. I thought the director had to tell the actors how to act the scene, tell the cameraman how to shoot it, tell the production designer how to make it look, tell the editor exactly the cuts to make. But that's not a good approach, as far as I'm concerned. So over the years, my process has been to direct less and less and less, and work with gifted people, and then turn them loose. I made up a name for what, like Rachel getting married, for example, is for me it's an act of collective invention. Get gifted people together, great things are going to happen.
Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone, gentlemen, for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks.
There's one right in the back there on the left. Right, left. Depends which way I'm facing.
I enjoyed the film quite a bit. So much so, I came here tonight to hear about Jonathan Demme, but I'm actually more interested in hearing about Carolyn Parker.
Yay!
Yeah.
We did it.
My impression
Nicely
watching her
phrased.
over the 5 years of filming is she seemed to smile a lot less. She seemed to have a lot less energy. She won the battle, but can you speak about her as a person over the course of the 5 years?
Daniel, you should do this. Two headlines. One is that Carolyn was in pain for her leg issues, her knee issues, almost the entire time we've known her. She had pain associated with the disability that led to the need for knee replacement. The knee replacements were not done well, and she had a new kind of pain that came with that. She had to take pain pills, which contained her enthusiasm from time to time, depending on how much of the pain medication she was on. And she got 5 years older during that period of time. That's an interesting perspective, and I believe that must be there, and I get that. I'm so hung up on the journey to get back in the house and getting back in the house and the satisfaction we see from that, that quest, that I kind of have a blind spot on that, and thank you for pointing that out. What do you think, Daniel?
I think one of the things you're seeing is that I think this is a movie about friendship between the filmmakers and Carolyn. And that as time goes on, yes, she gets older and tired, she's also not smiling like she's the hostess anymore. She's our buddy, more and more. She's our friend. And she's willing to talk about stuff, as Jonathan said earlier, that she wouldn't talk about before. So I think part of what you see is it's like the difference between a new friend and an old friend. With a new friend, you're making all the connections and it's all kind of headlines and bright. And as you get to know each other more, it's kind of you sit down and go, well, how are things?
That's a great point. That's a completely different perspective on it, from the viewer's point of view.
Yeah, and so part of what I think the brilliance of Jonathan to include the filmmakers in the movie is that it is this dialogue between the filmmakers and Carolyn, as well as telling her story. It's her inviting us deeper and deeper into her home. And maybe that's part of what you're seeing there. I don't know if that helps.
Great answer.
Maybe I can address that also.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
There's, there's a toll that trying to rebuild your house takes on you. So I agree with Daniel. Like if you're married, when you first get married, honey, I got some chicken in the refrigerator, and it's fricasseed and there's onions on it, and then 5 years later, there's chicken in the refrigerator. So.
Oh, listen to the married people laugh.
I got chicken. You know what's going on. Or
Honey, is there anything to eat?
It's chicken. Chicken. Maybe it gets boiled down to chicken. But anyway, you know each other, as Daniel was saying, and you don't have to be as perky anymore. But there is a toll that I think the people trying to rebuild and get back home, it does take a toll on you, but it also, as they said, it gives you the satisfaction of knowing that there's renewal in life and things can be renewed. And New Orleans will never be exactly the same, but it's back, and there's new things there that weren't there before, but this still has many traditions, and we still got our po' boy sandwiches and gumbo, so it's the same, but it's different.
And we had one more question.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
First of all, I enjoyed the film very much, and Mr. Jonathan Demme, I'm a huge fan of yours, and
Thank you.
your works have inspired me. I'm in film and stuff. And I was just wondering, through the 5 years that you were in the Ninth Ward in New Orleans, since this film has been completed, have you ever since gone back, and if so, what is the progress like besides besides Carolyn Parker's house?
Yeah, I had a very distinct sense of withdrawal when I would visit Carolyn or Harist or Pastor Mel or our friend Malik Rahim. If I wasn't filming, I didn't know how to behave without a camera there going like this. It took me a while to be able to kind of just kind of like relax, and instead of being thrilled at what kind of footage I was getting from my friends, to just bask in my friends. It was hard. Again, I felt there was a little bit of awkwardness, and equally there was like, damn, this is great. I should be shooting. But it's like, no, you shouldn't be shooting. You should be living. You should be living this moment with your friends. So that was kind of it. But I'll tell you what, to go down there, when we go there and go over to Carolyn's house, it's that house now. It's a finished house. That other place, we spent a lot more time in the disaster house, so much time, and in the hideous FEMA trailer. And the new house, the real house, the lived-in house, is still relatively new, so it's exciting to go visit there again. It's such a success story. And the same thing with Harist. Well, if you saw today, you see the seeds that were planted after the floods left in the Harrison family's life, and our footage shows what was happened. But the family has really done an amazing effort to revive they've started the Young Guardians of the Flame, and instead of having relics or almost archaeological artifacts from the Mardi Gras Indian culture before the floods that were stored in the whatever you call those things, the sheds. Now we see we see Donald in full regalia that he made going through the streets of the Ninth Ward on Mardi Gras Day. We see the kids in the Young Guardians of Flame all in their own regalia that they helped make out in the streets. So it's very exciting. It's wonderful. We were there during, the times are still tough. They're tough everywhere in America. They might be tough around here. But it's so much better now. It's so great to get back in your house and to be able to proceed with the things that really matter to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was fantastic. I hope you enjoyed getting the chance to see the movie, and I hope you enjoyed the question and answers. Thank you for your wonderful questions.
Thank you all so much. Thank
May
you.
I please,
Thank you.
May I please say thank you very much, Donald Harrison,
Yeah.
Daniel Wolfe, Jonathan Demme.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I should also say, on a note, that we are back with the Words and Music Festival, Whamfest, tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 in Linfield Hall with Robert Pinsky and a lot of people who play jazz. Woo. Ladies and gentlemen, Whamfest is closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.